What is being done by this cult to normal human beings is unspeakable. I was informed that it was my fault that the rape had happened, and I had to make amends, and was not allowed to report it to the police. I cannot sit by any longer. Hello, my name is Danielle. I grew up in Scientology, coming to their headquarters in East Grinstead in 1973 at aged 11. At just age 12, I was sent alone with our parents to the flagship Apollo to be with L. Ron Hubbard for a year. Following being locked up in the chain locker of the ship by L. Ron Hubbard, I was sent back to the East Grinstead Headquarters in England. At age 14, I was raped by a member of staff based at the headquarters in East Grinstead. I was sent to see what they call their ethics officer or master-at-arms. I was informed that it was my fault that the rape had happened, and I had to make amends and was not allowed to report it to the police. At age 16, I was taken out of school by the Scientologists against my will and was told I could not take my A-levels. I had to work for the organisation instead. My mother went on to have a stroke, and the Scientologists turned up at the hospital before any medical intervention could happen, stating that Scientology could handle her. She then had 2 more mini strokes and was finally admitted to hospital, but by then was paralysed down her left side for the rest of her life. If it is true that the mayor of East Grinstead has accepted a £50,000 donation from Scientology, I say shame on you. If any of these donations over the years have gone to any children's charities, that makes it even worse. I want to begin by saying how important I feel it is for all of our truths to be told. We can no longer sit on our haunches knowing that the abuses by Scientology that happened to me are still being perpetuated and perpetrated today. I can no longer sit in the dark and not join forces with all these so-called suppressive people who I like to call special people. Special because they care passionately about the Sea Org and staff members who are still in the blinkered bubble that is the organisation and cult of Scientology. Just quite why it is that law enforcement, local councils and leaders, and the wealthy elite continue to support an organisation masquerading as a religion is only testament to just how much conniving and arse-licking or brown-nosing the cult have been and continue to perform. It is little wonder that people within the organisation are unaware of the real truth when they have communications restricted to that which the cult deem necessary. By teaching the adherents within the cult that suppressive people are not to be listened to or believed, that TV and newspapers should be restricted, that surfing the internet should be constrained and curbed, means that the voice of the individual is divested to such a degree they cannot even think for themselves any longer. I have already covered having been brought up as a Scientologist from age 5 or 6, taking courses, being sent to the flagship Apollo just age 12 on my own, being assigned to the RPF and RPF's RPF, being locked in the chain locker and then the laundry room of the ship by L. Con Hubbard, only to have to petition him for permission to rejoin my family at St. Hill in England before being escorted back. I've spoken about being raped at age 14 and being blamed for it as having pulled it in, made to make amends and not being allowed to report it to the police. The stories are numerous and tragic. They speak of abuse, neglect, maltreatment, restriction of nutrition and food, prohibition of basic human needs and necessities. They speak of hiding how many people lived in dormitories in Stonelands, the big manor house in West Hoathly near East Grinstead. When the Department of Health came to inspect the berthing, an order would be sent out to all the staff, called crew, to dismantle and put into storage many of the bunk beds to make it seem as though fewer people were sleeping in the rooms to make it look legal. We had no proper heating, no carpets, and few curtains. Talk to me of stories about my having to care for 2 small children under the age of 4 when I was a teenager. These 2 very young children had been sent ahead of their parents who had stayed behind in their country to sell up their house and organise shipment of their possessions, so I was left to care for the youngsters until the parents arrived. I have 2 friends in particular who were persuaded to have abortions. I know of someone who was forced to marry at a very young age. Children are considered adults in a child's body from age 11 in Scientology, and it was not, and is still not, unusual for children to be working, pulled out of full-time education, and be forced to work for the cult instead. A close friend was a night nanny at age 14, responsible for all the young children at Stonelands at night, until parents came home at 11 or 12 at night from St. Hill. Once the house caught fire, she personally had to rescue children from a smoke-filled room. One child nearly lost her life after a supposed game of hide-and-seek where she was locked in a box freezer. Thankfully, a member of staff carried out CPR and she was revived. Would this have been reported to the authorities? I wonder. Another child went out on an outing with a group of children and nannies to the seaside, and tragically, he did drown. Were the nannies trained in health and safety? Apart from a hygiene certificate for working in the nursery kitchens, I'm not aware of them having to take safety courses outside of the organisation. I knew David Miscavige briefly when he and his family came to St. Hill. He attended school with us briefly too. I was friends with his sisters Denise and Laurie. To hear of him getting away with having physically abused senior staff at the international headquarters and getting away with it sickens me. Furthermore, I'm repulsed by the fact that indoctrinated and innocent public, staff and Sea Org members of the cult of Scientology are wholly unaware of Miscavige's brutal behaviour. We all need to be pressing law enforcement and questioning just why he is being allowed to get away with this scot-free. We also need to be asking people like the Mayor of East Grinstead to take stock and listen to the testimonies of the abused. Shame on him for accepting a cheque from the organisation in the amount of £50,000 at the recent IAS event. I'm not in agreement with people standing outside the orgs around the world shouting personal abuses at the staff, as I remember I was one of them once. It's enough that they have to deal with their own tough lives in the organisation, but we should be there for anyone who wants to leave, and we should be shouting out about the abuses of the cult and by the cult, and especially by Miscavige himself. What is being done by this cult to normal human beings is unspeakable, and I cannot sit by any longer. I hope you will join me in fighting the fight to get people within its clutches set free. Free to think and be themselves. Free to make their own choices. Free to love and be loved. Is this too much to ask? Thank you.